HODL me, HODL me, HODL me. Welcome to this new passion project of a show. I'm trying something, I'm doing something because it's been far too long. It's been many months now. It's been itching, it's been inside of me. I really wanted to start a podcast slash YouTube channel show to discuss weekly events in the crypto world. We are starting very, very strong with my first guest, Natalie Brunell, who's an investigative journalist, used to work for CNN, mainstream media, lives down in California, and she left that lofty position to start her own podcast called Coin Stories, a YouTube channel. I invite you to follow her on Twitter, to subscribe to her YouTube channel as well. She is a very, very strong voice in the world of Bitcoin, and she's a specialist like no other. And if you have any questions, she's so kind and very, very willing to help navigate and understand what many consider to be the safest asset you can possibly hold of all time. It is replacing gold. Some people call it digital real estate. Some people call it digital gold. Some call it the ultimate hedge against inflation and store of value. So we are here to educate. I am here to, as a rookie now of 9 months, kind of talk about my journey through the space and start this new show that I'm really excited about. Sometimes it'll be interviews. Sometimes it will be just reviewing the news and maybe teaching perhaps how to use a MetaMask wallet, how to, yeah, all kinds of digital wallets, NFTs, really hot right now. And I am dabbling in all those spaces and really, really fascinated. So if at the end of this episode, you want to perhaps buy a little bit of Bitcoin, I have left a referral link code for my Canadian viewers in the description below. So make sure you subscribe to this channel. It is new. I have officially probably 0 followers right now. And we will go week by week and see what happens. And if you are living in Canada and want to buy Bitcoin or Ethereum, there is a link in the description below for this Montreal company called ShakePay. That's what I use to buy Bitcoin. And you automatically get a free $10 with your initial $100 investment. So if you put $100, you get $110 like that by using this link. So free money. You can even cash it out if you want that $10 to go buy a coffee or two. I think you can actually just buy one coffee with $10 now because of inflation. Anyway, so the link is in the description below. Enjoy. And yeah, this is really exciting for me. I'm really happy that you're here. And if you had any questions about Bitcoin, this is the place to be, because Natalie, an Emmy nominated investigative journalist, is here to discuss Bitcoin at length and demystify everything you've possibly heard about Bitcoin. Perhaps that it's bad for the environment, perhaps that it's used by criminals, perhaps that it's going to go to zero one day and it's completely speculative. So we cover all of that, and I'm really excited to yeah, to be here and have a good time. HODL me, HODL me, HODL me. Super exciting. Anyway, here we go with my interview with very special guest Natalie Brunell. Follow her on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter. Get off Facebook. Enjoy. So let's get right into it.
Okay.
Satoshi's white paper just turned 13.
hmm
We just had a weekly close of all-time high, and it's officially Moonvember. So I guess it's a good time to be a Bitcoin holder right now. Is it not?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I mean, we gained more in October. I think it was $17,000 total than any month prior. So that's super exciting. I mean, it's a great time to be both investing in Bitcoin and to be transitioning my career into Bitcoin full time.
Totally, yeah. Satoshi famously said, if you don't believe it or don't get it, I don't have time to try to convince you. Sorry. You've actually made a job out of explaining it and meeting people in this space. And it's just, are you tired of explaining it by now? I mean, do you have a lot of blank stares still when you go out? And
No, I don't get tired of explaining it. I have a real passion for this because it took me a while to see the light, if you will. I felt like especially in my news career, I knew that there was a massive amount of problems in our society. I just didn't connect the dots to money until I learned about Bitcoin. And so I think that's what I'm super passionate about is I relate to everyone who's out there who's like, oh my gosh, this country's getting so divided and every problem's getting worse and it's harder to survive and like make money. And guess what? Bitcoin's the solution that fixes it, not financial advice, but truly, I mean, the way it was programmed to return us to a sense of hard money that can't be manipulated by the federal government, it's just amazing to me. So I'm really excited about sharing the message.
I love the spirit of the way you speak about Bitcoin because I just entered the space back in February. It was my first time, like, finally trying to understand it, having heard of Bitcoin for the past 12, 13 years. And I was like, what the heck is Bitcoin? Like, I need to get this. I need to understand it once and for all, right? So I dove in and I learned, I've never learned so much about the economy, about, as you say, sound money, hard money, the gold standard that we've kind of let go of 50 years ago. And a lot of the world's problems are directly correlated to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting. Like now I go out in groups and I'm very passionate and I feel like I've really done my homework. So I feel confident in spreading the message. And it's funny because I will talk to people who are very, very intelligent and successful in whatever the field they work in, high powered doctors or people within law. And they literally ask me, well, I don't really understand how money printing works. I don't really understand how our interest rates are manipulated. Like, what do you mean? And it's just so interesting that education is lacking in general. I mean, people, unless they specifically go into economics or they learn about something like Bitcoin, they could be experts in their field and have no idea what's happening at the federal level with our money. And it's kind of scary and enlightening. And it makes me very passionate about spreading the message because I think everyone needs to have this knowledge and then they can make the right choice for themselves and their families. And I think Bitcoin provides just so much opportunity for new generational wealth to be created. And, I don't want people to miss out on that opportunity because there's no barrier to entry. You can buy as little as $1. Bitcoin has no CEO, it has no color, no language, no gender, nothing. I mean, it's like, it's for everybody. And it's amazing in that way.
Well, that's what's crazy because it seems like, well, it doesn't seem, it is such a progressive, technology that seems to fix so many problems. However, there seems to be a dichotomy when you listen to people like Elizabeth Warren talk about it, for instance, who obviously is a champion of the left. And you live in Los Angeles. Obviously, you know that a lot of people are left leaning. And the first thing, and I really want to get this out of the way because it's the first thing that comes up as soon as I mention Bitcoin to anyone immediately is the environment. It's the first thing that, is talked about and people are weary. And Montreal here in Canada, people are very, very progressive and are worried about the environment. And I understand, obviously everyone is, but it seems like there's this dichotomy of like, well, you don't understand what it is. You just seem to have read an article about it being, highly consume a lot of energy. And, but so do so many other things. And it is the technology that seems to be steering into the right direction faster than any other previously.
Yeah, I think that's why it's so important to educate both people who hold political office or are trying to hold political office, as well as journalists. That's why I kind of left the general legacy news media to focus specifically on this because the awareness needs to increase. You're absolutely right. I mean, the energy arguments are coming from people that clearly haven't done their homework. And I think it's amazing that the process of Bitcoin mining, which, Bitcoin miners are trying to pay the least amount possible, and they are spurring innovation in green energy and technology that will actually make the world cleaner in order to be able to reinforce this distributed network. I think it's super powerful and exciting. And if people really understood how mining worked and why renewable energy was so important to that market, then they would be a little bit more favorable to Bitcoin. So I urge people like the Elizabeth Warrens out there who probably have the greatest of intentions, right, for their constituents to be able to improve their lot in life. please do your homework, educate yourself, let people like myself come into your office and talk to you, because this could really change people's lives. It's already changing people's lives in third world countries and developing nations. And we should be a leader here in the West, in the United States, by adopting this and promoting the message of Bitcoin.
Absolutely. I guess we're doing our part here in Canada with the ETF, and there's a lot of green energy mining. Um, and as we saw, I guess a few months ago now with El Salvador, even using volcano energy, it just seems so important to be hammering this over and over again, because the mainstream media, and just an article. I mean, there's an article in the paper every week talking about the energy consumption and how it's terrible. And it's so loud that people obviously have other things to do. They don't have time to do the homework and just automatically go, oh, well, seems like that's going nowhere, right?
Right. Yeah. And that's why it's important to provide context, because no one's getting mad about how much energy our washing machines are using or our Christmas tree lights. And they're focusing this attention on Bitcoin in a way that I think that they shouldn't. And I think that there needs to be just more research done by the people putting out this information. And you need to look at the source too, right? Are the outlets or the people that are arguing the energy crisis, are they benefiting from the fiat system in some way, or do they not want the legacy banking system to collapse? Because really, I mean, Bitcoin, again, like the purpose of it and the mission, it's just so virtuous. And so I think people that actually take the time to understand why it was created, how it functions, how important mining is, it's like, I mean, literally it creates the digital scarcity that is so unique and so brilliantly programmed. Then people, might change their minds about Bitcoin and why they should invest in it.
I never thought I would imagine seeing left-leaning people defend banks kind of indirectly, right?
I know things are a little wonky and upside down in our country right now, I would say. So, I think that Bitcoin returns us to a sense of just individual power and freedom and sovereignty. And I think it's really important to make sure that we are protecting the value of our money going forward. America was built on this sense of like the middle class and just being able to, provide value and sort of you create your own destiny by what you bring to the table. But the playing field should be kind of, fair at the start. And I think Bitcoin actually provides that to us, because we've had an economy that's been so manipulated by artificial interest rates and money printing that just goes to basically the wealthiest individuals, and makes it harder for people at the bottom and on fixed incomes. And we need to address those problems. And instead of just spending and raising the debt ceiling and acting like it doesn't matter, we should look at the core of why this problem started and how we can fix it through technology.
Hmm. Well, I'm going through every kind of concern some random person's going to throw my way, and I want to throw it your way because I know you had all these conversations before, and I hope you're not tired of explaining it. But if we can move on to the next one, obviously Bitcoin is used by criminals.
Well, I mean, I think that that's a really terrible argument in the sense that cash is also used by criminals. Cash is probably used more than anything by criminals, right? Because you can't really trace those transactions. And this is digital cash, right? But the legacy banking system, if you look at the amount of fraud and scamming and the amount of fines that US bank regulators have actually fined massive corporate banks, I mean, it's just ridiculous, right? So I think that fraud and nefarious activity is going to happen in pretty much every economy. However, with Bitcoin, I think it actually makes it harder because the blockchain is a public ledger, right? And I'm sure that as forensic analysis continues to evolve in this space, people might be able to track wallets much easier than you could track some transactions in a bank account or certainly in cash. So I think it's actually a space that will hold institutions much more accountable because transactions are all recorded into the blockchain. And I think that opens us up for having a more transparent, accountable government as well. I mean, what if we knew every single amount that the government actually spent, as opposed to having this like kind of, we don't even know how many dollars are actually in existence. We don't know how much the government is spending on every little thing. And it'd be nice to kind of open up those books. I think Bitcoin encourages that kind of system that's more transparent and it's immutable. And it's just, I think the technology is amazing in that way.
Even to come back on the environment, I mean, it seems like no one's attacking the gold fracking industry, the digging, the mining, the financial system as well. That like you just cut so many middlemen out. You have something that's really public and decentralized and verified.
Mhm.
It really seems like, I mean, it is solving so many problems. And I really admire your voice in the space and how well you're doing with it. I mean, just leaving as well. Tell me a little bit about this whole. Well, first of all, tell me about yourself, where you're from. I know you immigrated from Poland with your family when you were 5 years old, and then coming to the U.S. What was that like? What do you ever go back to Poland? And then leading up to leaving your pretty comfortable job, I can imagine.
Yes. So all of those things are correct. My family came to the US from Poland. I grew up outside of Chicago. I watched my parents work really, really hard because they basically had to start their lives over. I think I always had a sense for the importance of something like Bitcoin with regards to individual freedom and sovereignty because my family grew up in a communist country. And I love the idea that Bitcoin, the government doesn't control it and they also don't know how much you have. So in the case of someone wanting to flee a country or, cross borders, the government can't stop you from bringing your entire wealth because you could hold it in a number in your head or on a hard drive, as
Mhm.
opposed to a lot of people who flee countries or did, in the 80s and 90s when my parents did, you could only bring $100 worth of what you had. And so that makes it very hard to start over in a new country. So yeah, they came here. I always wanted to work in media. I basically, my parents would watch a lot of news to augment their English skills. And I sort of grew up wanting to become Barbara Walters. I loved the idea of interviewing people and storytelling. What I love about interviews is I love people and learning about them. And I just wanted to learn as much as I can. Like I'm hungry for learning everything I can. And I worked my way up in my industry. I started at a very small market, and then I ended up at networks. I've worked at CNN. I've worked at ABC News. I was a national correspondent for a brief amount of time, covering breaking news across our country. And I would say that in the last 5 years, I noticed just a lot of the problems of society almost feeling like they were all intensifying and magnifying. And I think that magnification came in the sense of a really strong division in our country that was sown by media narratives and on social media, where a lot of those feelings could fester and balloon into something bigger. And it was very, very sad and scary for me to see that, because I've always felt like there was something wrong with the system. I have to admit, like, my family worked really hard and then lost everything in the financial crisis of 08, 09. And it was kind of this feeling of like, wow, you could come to this country, do all the right things, right? Work hard, pay your taxes, work nonstop, put your kids in the right school, and you could still lose everything. And it seems like some people made money on that whole situation, or people were aware that it was happening and the rug was pulled out from under you. And it's like, why is the system rigged? And I think it's literally why Donald Trump won in 2016, because there was this sense of distrust that was building and building in the federal government of just, these people have been in their jobs for 20, 30 years, and the problems aren't getting better. They're getting worse. So like the politicians, a lot of people, I think they think they're corrupt, which I would agree with, because I've interviewed or covered a lot of stories with corruption. And so I think that there was this climate of just frustration. And I did not understand until I learned about Bitcoin that it really related to how broken our money is and how
Mm.
sick our money is. And so when I came to realize that, it was really like enlightening, and it was like a renaissance for me, because what I felt like had no hope now did have hope and did have a solution. And I know that that probably sounds crazy to people who don't understand Bitcoin, right? Like, oh, these people think it's going to solve everything and the world's going to be perfect. Well, if we didn't have Bitcoin, I literally don't know how we would solve it. I don't, because I don't see how else we would go to a system of hard money again. And with Bitcoin and people basically, it's a populist movement where people opt out themselves and go on to this peripheral, this other monetary rail. I just think it could solve so many problems, and I'm really inspired by that. So I decided to leave my job and spread the word on Bitcoin.
Yeah, I was reading the Bitcoin standard a couple of months ago, and it blew my mind how you have these quotes from old economists from the 70s and 80s trying to, projecting themselves in the future. If we could create this system, this decentralized system that could just fix the money and have like a finite amount and all, they're like describing Bitcoin back in the 70s and 80s pretty much. And you're like, the writing's on the wall, it's right there. And now knowing being in the future, you're like, well, here we go. It's really, really fascinating to learn about all this. And it seems like B's for Bitcoin, B's for bipartisan, definitely. And is, as you said earlier, like just no gender, no politics, no nothing. It's really for everyone. Which leads me to ask you, I mean, you can't explain it to your friends and people who have a minute, but what's your, elevator pitch? How do you explain it to a 10-year-old? How do you explain it to your mom? Like,
To a 10-year-old, that's hard. Although I have a really great book called Bitcoin for Kiddos that I encourage everyone to get, both for kids and adults. But generally, I don't like to talk about Bitcoin first. I like to talk about the problem first. I think people can really grasp the issues that are at hand. And whether you're in the US or Canada or elsewhere, the problems are global at this point, right? Everything's getting more expensive and it's harder and harder to get by with the same amount of money that you had 10 years ago. And so I like to talk about sort of the idea of the collapsing purchasing power of our money and some of the problems that exist with just how affordable things are, and talking a little bit about inflation. And then I say, look at the purchasing price of the US dollar, which has basically collapsed 95% over the last several decades. And look at Bitcoin, which has appreciated 1,000,000% in just 10 years. And so I start by making that comparison of if you had just put in a couple of dollars, your money would have gone up in Bitcoin, whereas it definitely would have lost value if you kept it in cash. And the other alternative is basically you're just becoming a portfolio manager, you're becoming a stock, trader. And so, how much time will that consume of your day trying to time the market and figure out which stocks are right, and do you believe in the company? Well, Bitcoin is set it and forget it. It's not something you need to trade. You don't need to time the market. You just put your money in to preserve its value. And I think that kind of resonates with people because it's not so overwhelming, the idea of basically having a new savings account, a new savings technology that harnesses the value and energy of your money into the future. And it makes it easier than having to like play the market, or try to enter the real estate space when things are so expensive. So I kind of start with the problem, which is our money, and the solution, which is Bitcoin.
you're a very powerful voice in the space, and there are a lot of women as well, like Lynn Alden and Kathy Wood, Melton Demers, who constantly hammer the message and talk about this all the time. Do you think? I mean, I know that you want to bring more and more women into the space, and it seems like there is a lot of it's very bro and a lot of dudes, and I guess for the nerdy aspect, the techie aspect of it. But do you think that maybe historically women were just less risk averse, and it was just generally speaking across the investment board itself?
I don't know. I mean, if you look at things like finance and engineering, they're very driven by men. And I don't know exactly what caused it. I've read some very interesting psychological studies that I don't necessarily agree or disagree with, but I find them interesting. Like one thing that I've seen Jordan Peterson put out is that he said typically men, just based on their psychology, they tend to resonate with things that involve actual things, whereas women tend to resonate with things that involve people. And so men typically go into engineering or finance or cars or sports, whereas women go into care, communication, media, something that's more people oriented, which, if you look at schools, and I just even think about my classrooms when I was going through education, that was reflected. My guy friends were in the business and engineering courses, and my girlfriends were in PR, communications, journalism. And why is that? I have no idea. So I think that there's always been a bit of a divide naturally just within these fields. But I do think it's important to highlight women who are successful and doing well. I definitely would not put myself in the category of the Kathy Woods and Lynn Aldens out there. But I'm just trying to use my sort of skills and background to provide some kind of role within this industry, which is, I think, just spreading the awareness and being like a messenger or a communicator. I really believe in that saying, luck is preparation meets opportunity. And so for me, it's like I didn't even know it, but the last 10 years as a broadcast journalist has been a training ground for me to know how to break down a complicated message and synthesize it and simplify it to a general audience that has, very, very little knowledge about whatever the topic is, but just needs sort of a 30,000-foot high overview. And so now I hope to apply those skills to Bitcoin because it is so, so complicated. If you like start to peel back the layers, I mean, gosh, to really understand mining and Merkle trees and 250s, all of it, it's just so complicated. But you don't necessarily need to know that to understand, appreciate, and use Bitcoin, right? Like I don't need to put together a car engine to be able to drive a car and know that I need a car and it makes my life better. But some people also might want to go down into the weeds like that. So I just think it's important to communicate the message. And the more women that we have who are naturally great communicators, I think, and who care a lot about people and a sense of community, the more I think that Bitcoin will thrive. And I really think that Bitcoin needs a woman's touch. And if I can help provide that in some way, I would love to.
It's so healthy because I remember when I just got in February, I mean, initially everyone was getting into Clubhouse. So I started spending a lot of time in those rooms and listening to, Bitcoiners and obviously the NFT space and crypto in general. And I just got dizzy with all this information, but I didn't even know there was such a thing as, Bitcoin maximalists. And I got into these rooms with, Peter McCormack and Jimmy Song, and is that his name? Or anyways, and there's all these people, and people were genuinely curious, learning about the technology, learning about the space, not knowing that there was all these different like drawers, and they would just get hammered in these rooms and destroyed for asking a question about XRP or Ethereum or what, and it was like you didn't really feel like being part of it anymore and just wanted to leave. But that's what I really love about your voice, is that you seem to, talk with all these people and exchange with them, but then it's really alluring to learn about it with your vibe in general. What do you think about like just the Bitcoin maximalist, uh, kind of really protective and like nothing else can penetrate this
Yeah.
world?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for your comment. I don't like toxic maximalism. I don't think that people should make people feel like they can't be in the community or that they can't ask questions, because I
Mhm.
think this is really a learning process for a lot of us. And there are some really brilliant minds in this space who went down the altcoin, road, and they maybe bought a bunch of them. And then somehow they realized that, all that really matters is Bitcoin. At the same time, I think that this whole arena of this new decentralized finance technology is super fascinating. Now, personally, I'm a maximalist. I'm not a toxic maximalist, but I'm a maximalist in the sense that Bitcoin is my savings technology, and I think it's going to solve a lot of our global economic problems and needs. However, I think that a lot of the things that are being created in this space are essentially technology companies, some of which will go on to be successful and some of which will fall. Some of them are total scams, and some of them might be worth something someday. And I think it's really important to study like who's behind them, how does it work, is it centralized, can the supply be expanded, is this just a token because it's a meme and it's just a flash in the pan. People really need to do their homework. And so what makes me sad is when people just kind of like ride the wave of the hype where, oh, this like JPEG is just super popular and I think it's going to be worth 100,000, in the future. But really that's pure speculation. You have no idea what it might be worth tomorrow, much less 10 years from now. And I just urge people to really sit down. I mean, Bitcoin's different. Bitcoin isn't something that I see as a fad or as a technology company. I almost see the other altcoins and the other projects in the space as sort of like different websites or companies, whereas I see Bitcoin as the internet, like as the pipes for this amazing new system that we're going to transition into, that will protect our money and allow us to reorder ourselves in a more fair and balanced way, and that doesn't allow countries to go into debt and just ridiculously expand the money supply to make each dollar worth less. So I really don't even see them as the same. And people that are really passionate about other projects that if you want to work on them, that's great. But I feel like my calling is just to educate people on our monetary system and why Bitcoin fixes it.
Absolutely. It feel even myself, like I've dabbled with all of it. Like I'm definitely passionate and learning about NFTs. I'm learning about all the blockchain technologies. Just Polkadot hit an all-time high today. But it seems that all roads lead to Bitcoin, like where if I'm going to pull some profit out, and that's where it really becomes interesting, is that you don't even think in cash or fiat money anymore. You just want to at least take out your initial investment. You've had fun, you've seen the ride, and then just keep stacking those sats, keep stacking that Bitcoin. And it seems like it's just that's the end game, is to just accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible. Even Michael Saylor himself would say, I don't really have time to look into all the other stuff. I can't kick back and relax and just like hold this for 10, 15 years. So for the easy, like you say, it's very complicated. You can go down that rabbit hole, but if you can just like not think about it and keep buying Bitcoin every day. My girlfriend dollar costs average like a champion. So every week, no matter what the price, just buying a little bit of Bitcoin with every paycheck, and then like in a matter of no time, like a couple of months, she's doubled her money. It's incredible.
I think that's just absolutely amazing. And yeah, exactly. I think maybe Michael Saylor has tweeted this too, but it's like with the altcoins, only invest what you can afford to lose. Whereas with Bitcoin, only invest what you absolutely can't afford to lose. And so I think there's nothing wrong with people trying to make a profit, especially in the era of massive inflation and debasement of currency. So if people want to trade these other coins, like I believe in free markets, and you'll have to try to time the market, and I wish you all the best. I'm just sort of one of those people who I'd rather not have to think so much about it, because I think it creates two jobs, right? All of a sudden you're a plumber and you're also like a day trader.
Yeah.
Whether you're crypto or stock, you have to like have two expertise, right? Well, why can't you just do whatever it is that makes you happy, and you take your money and you put it in a place where it goes up in value as opposed to the opposite? So you can do whatever it is you love to do, make your skills and your passions into your job, and don't worry about your money collapsing. I think that's what Bitcoin offers us.
So what you're saying is you don't hold any Ethereum.
I won't share any of my other holdings. I will say I've held other coins that I've sold because I
Wanted more
realized,
Bitcoin.
yeah, exactly. Swap it into Bitcoin, because there's just to me, it was like I could ride a wave and potentially lose all this money and have to worry about what it's doing on a daily basis, or I could just put it into Bitcoin and not worry about it. And the funny thing about that is people talk to me about checking their account like every day. I can't even tell you the last time I actually logged on to see how much my Bitcoin is. Like I literally look at it as just put it away. It's going to grow. I don't look at it every day. I can't tell you the last day I looked at my balance.
So I guess that answers the question. Number 5 is when people just tell you, well, it's so speculative. What if this goes to zero, right?
I mean, again, that comes from someone who hasn't done their homework, because I truly, I don't see how anyone who understands Bitcoin could think that it could actually go to zero. I mean, we had, half of the mining power went offline pretty much overnight with the China ban, and the network was completely resilient. It bounced back so quickly. Of course it dipped, but look, it retraced all the way back up to a new all-time high after a nation state, a massive nation state where most of the mining was concentrated, took it offline. I mean, that to me is incredible. Like, to me, Bitcoin is bomb-proof. You cannot take down a distributed network. It's as impossible as shutting down the internet. So I do not see Bitcoin going to zero. My only hope is that I think the US will be kind of a trendsetter, in the sense that what it does will impact other nations. And so I hope and pray that the politicians who have the power to make some of the regulatory and taxing decisions make the right ones, so that other nations can follow suit, and that Bitcoin can be the US can be a leader in this space.
This morning, I got a notification that was telling me my bank, it was charging me, I believe, about $30 to use my bank account. And I've been kind of messing around with Celsius lately and staking cryptocurrency and and it was like Monday mornings, the payout, right? Where like I just got $25 in my bank account. I was like, wow, there's no fee to get into Celsius. And then they're sending me every Monday some interest, like about 5 or 6% on my Bitcoin, 10% on my other coins. And I'm like, when's the last time my bank did that? I got it. Like I'm paying off my bank with my Celsius interest. What do you think of those platforms? like I guess there's BlockFi, Celsius, all those, where I mean there's two schools of thought, right? There's, you can be completely sovereign and not your keys, not your coin, have a ledger, keep it there, like, digging a hole in the backyard and putting your gold away, or actually lending your crypto to companies like this.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think everyone needs to make their own decision on that. And I hope that people do their homework on the companies. There are going to be more and more products that allow you to stake and earn yield, which is probably very attractive compared to the legacy banking system and the tiny amount that you get if you just put your money away there. So, to each their own on that. I will say that this is one of the things that just makes me so frustrated about our current system, is the fact that they are punishing the little guy, right? It's like, if you don't have enough money in your account, you get charged. If you, now they're trying to, put forth the $600 IRS requirement, like all of these things
That's an
that they,
old Louis C.K. joke, actually. They're like, did they ever charge you because you don't have enough money in your account? Like, just give it
I
to
mean,
this guy. This guy's got too much money. Let's give him the interest.
it's just ridiculous. I just think that they're really hurting the average person, and they're making it harder and harder. And it's interesting because they're making them more and more reliant on the government, right? Like, I saw a really interesting stat just in the last couple of months. It's called the SAAR, and it basically tracks the amount of personal income that comes from government handouts or government assistance. And it has risen in our country from 5% in the 1960s to, in the pandemic, 31%. Almost a third of personal income in this country is coming from the government. Well, how do you reel that back, right? I mean, basically they're printing money and they're going further and further into debt, and they're promising everyone a free lunch and stimulus and, hey, we'll pay your rent, we'll pay your this. Well, we're basically making people completely dependent on the government. And then people pretty much have to vote for the guy that's going to maintain them in that system and give them the universal basic income. And we're moving closer and closer to exactly the type of government that my parents tried to flee, that makes everyone essentially have a difficult life and ends up in misery and ends up in a collapsed currency. And I don't understand how people don't see it. But again, I didn't really see how these little baby steps that our government has been taking over the last few decades got us here. So I hope to help people sort of understand that, so that they can vote in people that are not going to do this. Because I think that the people in charge right now are making some very bad decisions.
So here's a question for you. I mean, I know that you don't look at your account ever and you can just kick back and you seem pretty chill with your investment and your Bitcoin. Do you see another bear market coming where, this could last a few years? It gets boring. People are just kind of like, oh, how's Bitcoin doing? Kind of laughing at whatever. And I guess, which leads to my second question. Have you ever sold any Bitcoin?
I've never sold any Bitcoin. I've been a holder and accumulator since 2017, which I'm very proud of. I've never sold. I understand why some people take it off the table, especially if they bought in early and they want to take some profits, which is probably really exciting for folks out there that had a ton of Bitcoin since the start. I would probably have done the same. But I'm one of those people that feels like, gosh, I got in too late. So no, I don't want to sell anytime soon. But what was your other question?
Oh, if you'd ever sold any Bitcoin, but before that, I don't remember actually. What was my other? Oh, do you see an eventual bear market with all this
Okay.
mainstream adoption coming right now? And it just seems like people more and more understanding to hold their Bitcoin and long term and just put it away. It's off the grid, right?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. And it's something that I do think about, because I I don't think that the current money printing situation and injecting liquidity into the market that the way that they have been is sustainable, because we are essentially moving further and further into hyperinflation. So I feel like the Fed is stuck between a rock and a hard place, and one direction, which they've apparently taken for the most part, is just allowing the purchasing power and our dollar to collapse. We're inflating and we're continuing to add money to the economy. On the flip side, right, is like a deflationary bust. If they were to hike interest rates, and especially to the amount that they would need to, and taper and pull money off the balance sheet, that to me would signify one of the biggest crashes that we've seen. And I just don't think that our government will allow that to happen. I think that we're in like a permanent stimulus mode. And I know that that leads to inflation. And so maybe they'll take little steps to try to taper here and there, raise rates a little bit, and there's going to be some volatility and it's going to be very, very frothy. But I just don't see our government doing what it takes to actually return us to a sense of where interest rates should be and allow the system to sort of regulate itself, because it would massively impact the price of real estate. Everyone who took out these, adjustable loans would be absolutely destroyed. People on fixed incomes, it would be devastating. And there are some economists and strategists out there who are predicting exactly that. They're saying that the Fed at some point has to hike the rates and taper, and literally everything will collapse, and we're going to have this big crash. And so I do think I don't think that that's impossible. And I think at that time, Bitcoin would see a massive liquidation event because people would be pulling money from everywhere that they could. But then I think it would even further the value proposition of Bitcoin, and people would see it as the ultimate hedge, because the response to any type of bust will be the printing. That's just what our government has shown us in history it will do. It's going to bail people out. It's going to provide stimulus at all costs, even if it means debasing your money. So I think it's going to be an interesting next couple of years, especially with central bank digital currencies coming out, and with inflation and where that's going, whether they're going to admit that it's not transitory. I'm curious to see what happens. And I do think that it's very possible that we'll have another crash and that will take Bitcoin down, but I certainly don't think it'll take it down to zero. And I think that ultimately it will be the ultimate value proposition for Bitcoin's value in the future, that you want a money that the government just cannot touch.
Amazing. Before I let you go, I have one last question.
Sure.
As I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, we just hit an all-time high last week. Bitcoin is, everyone's kind of now slowly, no one was talking about it this summer. Now everyone's calling me up. It's like, hey, have you heard of Bitcoin? I know you're into this. Like, how do you get into it and all this? It's the classic FOMO, I guess, even as a rookie myself. Now I've been through that crash, and I see, like, I was telling everybody this summer and no one was listening. And now
Yeah.
everybody's curious all of a sudden. What do you tell someone who feels, as yourself felt back in 2017, that you were too late?
Yeah. So, it's hard not to feel that way, right? Because you think of how you could have gotten into Bitcoin at $5 or $100, and it's like, oh my gosh, if only. But I just tell people that it's still really early. When you look at the comparison of adoption of the internet back in the 90s to Bitcoin today, we're very, very early, and we should hit about, I believe it's like 1 billion users by 2025. We are just 1 trillion of a market cap compared to like a 400 trillion M2 money supply. I mean, this is like tiny. It's tiny right now. And so you can only imagine where it goes from here. And I think people have a hard time wrapping their minds around something that's not only completely digital and metaphysical, but completely scarce. We have never had true digital scarcity before. And to understand and appreciate how brilliant the programming was that Satoshi Nakamoto basically devised, built on decades of research and trials for digital cash. I mean, it's truly amazing. It is amazing. And it is very, very early. And to think that right now, most people still hold their money in cash, or maybe they have real estate or a few stocks. This is transformative. Like, I think that there's no limit to what Bitcoin could be worth if the US and other countries adopted it as a global reserve currency. And I think 60,000 will look back on someday and think, whoa, that was super, super cheap. And I look forward to seeing where it goes in the next 10, 20 years.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your answers. Thank you for your voice, especially in the space. Every time I see you pop in on a Twitter Spaces, or I see you release a new episode of your podcast, I think it's filled with sunshine and insight and education. And I want you to keep doing what you're doing, because it's amazing.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Have a good evening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Have a good one.
Hodl me, hodl me, hodl me. I have my Bitcoin cap. I am ready to buy some sats. Thank you so much, Natalie Brunell, for educating us and discussing Bitcoin for 45 minutes. That was awesome. I encourage you to follow Natalie on Twitter. Get off Facebook, man. All the education is happening on Twitter right now. It's insane. It's funny how in Canada we've fallen behind and think that Twitter's done, but it is. They've just included Bitcoin tipping on their platform, which is incredible. So you can even send a little bit of Bitcoin to Natalie if you really enjoyed the education. And you can follow me on Twitter at Jason Bajada. I haven't stopped making music, so it'll be a mix of music, a mix of crypto, a mix of everything. So I'm really, really excited about this, and I hope you are too. I will be covering many different things in the following weeks. You might want to subscribe to this channel. I probably have 0 or 1 or 3 followers right now. So it's going to be, slowly but surely. And you can hit the like so it travels via the YouTube algorithms and gets to as many people as possible. And yeah, I'm just here to have fun. And if you are curious and want to purchase some Bitcoin, there is a referral link in the description of this YouTube video, and you get a free $10 with your first $100 purchase of Bitcoin. Or did I say Bitcoin? I meant Bitcoin or Ethereum. So you can click on that link. You put in $100, you get an extra $10. You can cash it out immediately if you want that $10. Go buy yourself a coffee, and voila. So thank you so much for being here, making it to the end, and I will see you soon with a new episode of HODL Me, HODL Me.